Sorry about the technological delay. This is the Utah State Board of Education Law and Licensing Committee, Friday morning. I think we have all of our board members present between an in-present meeting and a Zoom meeting. So I will just ask the board members the committee members to introduce themselves so that the public who may be listening can know who we are. First of all, I'm the chair. Of this committee. My name is Carol Lear. I'm a board member representing Park City and the Park City and Salt Lake City areas, and of course, children in Utah. So the other board members, Randy, go ahead.
I am Randy Booth from District 13, so I represent Nebo School District and Provo City School District, and generally all children.
Matt, are you?
Yes, thank you. I am Matt Hymas. I represent District 3, which covers West Valley City, Willett County School District, and Juab County School District.
Thank you. And then on Zoom, we have two other board members. Natalie?
Hi, my name is Natalie Klein. I am over District 11. That covers the west or the southwest portion of the Salt Lake Valley and just over into Utah County.
Thank you. And last, and certainly not least, Cindy?
Hi, Cindy Davis. I represent District 9, which is the northern part of Utah County around the side of Utah Lake down into some of the towns in Nebo down in that area.
Cindy, you might see if you can turn your sound up, or maybe it's on our end. Let's see if you can turn your sound up a little bit. Thanks. Welcome, and thank you for being here and attending this meeting, and thanks to all the people that have made a hybrid meeting possible. It's not easy, and the technology seems to always both help us and hurt us. We have a number of items today. We'll start with item 3.1, which is on my agenda. It's an action item. It's a request for a waiver of some board requirements by the Intech Collegiate Academy, and our AAG, Michelle Buse, has helped with this. So we will turn the time to her and welcome Jason Stanger, who is working with Intech Collegiate Academy. Michelle?
Okay, thank you. Intech Collegiate Academy is coming before you today for a renewal of a waiver, and they're the final early college high school in this group of 4 early college high schools that have asked for similar waivers. And so I know it feels like you've seen a lot of these because you see each one twice in the committee meeting and the board meeting. So it probably feels like you've already seen 6 of them when really there's 3. This is the last one, the 4th one. They are requesting a waiver of 1 credit of PE and a half a credit of arts. And in place of that, in lieu of that, their students are involved in more STEM-focused curriculum and early college programs. They've provided documentation that shows that their authorizer, Cache School District, approved this waiver, as well as their own governing board. They've provided student achievement data that shows that their ACT scores remain far above the state average and that their graduation rate is in the high 90s and is above the state average as well. They also provided a list of the last few years, the average number of college credits that each of their students graduates with. And they also provided how frequently each of those waivers has been used by students in the last several years. So with that, we would recommend that the committee support this waiver renewal request. And I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you. That's a great explanation. Mr. Stanger, would you like to add anything to that? I think the committee, we've seen a few of these, so I think the committee understands, but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to say anything you'd like to say.
We have just really appreciated this waiver in the last 3 years. It allows us to better meet our unique mission as an early college high school and a STEM-focused school. So we would appreciate your support in advancing this again.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being patient with us this morning. Committee members, do you have any questions or discussion of the request?
I have a motion if you're ready, Chair.
Let me just look for 1 second. That's the only thing I can't see now without Zoom. I can't see anybody raising their hand. So somebody's gonna have to.
Can I ask you a quick question? Chair?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Just out of curiosity, we have done this a lot. That was my question this morning, and how many of these do we have? So I appreciate you answering that. Are these all the same waivers? I haven't looked at them. I looked at each one, but I haven't compared against the other. Do they all ask for the same thing?
Go ahead, Michelle.
The early college high schools have not all asked for exactly the same thing. 2 of them asked for additional. They asked for the same credit waivers, but they asked for their schedule to be excused from the 180 day, and 2 of them have not asked for their schedule to be excused from the 180 day. So there's that distinction.
And then we have a number of waivers a couple of waivers for 180 day exceptions for more rural schools. So they're kind of all mixed, blended in together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we've seen a couple of these, not credit limits, but
Yeah,
we've seen a couple of these. And so I do recognize the difference between the 180 day rule and this. I just didn't know. The credit thing was when they asked, it seems like they regularly ask to dismiss art and PE.
Correct. That's the same for all 4.
Yes, okay, thank you.
thanks. That's helpful to keep us informed. I think with that, yes, Member Booth, we'd love your motion.
I move that the committee forward a recommendation to the board to waive the number of health, PE, and arts requirements in R277-700 for InTech Collegiate Academy.
Oh, and to discussion to that motion, Board Member Davis, Committee Member Davis also.
I just, I don't know, I'm gonna vote for it, and I always do, but I don't love it. I thought one of the schools that came before us brought like information about how their students were staying engaged physically or doing different things, and I really appreciated that. I hope we're, all of our schools are also kind of looking at this sort of well-roundedness of our students moving forward. And I understand this is a mission, but I hope kids are staying active too and participating and working toward healthy lifestyles and also maybe those things that make the world beautiful as well. But I will vote for the motion.
Thanks. I have had the same concerns. And so far, the waiver requests are very minimal, both in numbers of schools and in changes. So, and there's a point that I won't be comfortable with that either, and then we'll have to work out some kind of a compromise or discussion. So thank you. Any more discussion to that? The motion is that the committee forward a recommendation to the board to waive the number of health, PE, and arts requirements in R277-700 for, and this is a renewal, but doesn't say that in the motion, for InTech Collegiate Academy. All those in favor, please, would you just say aye? I think I can follow that more easily than seeing your vote on the screen, Natalie and Cindy.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I heard it was unanimous. Thank you very much. And thanks again, Jason, for being here and working with Michelle. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
The next item is item 3.2, another action item. It's a discussion of R277-922. The name of the rule is Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program. It's an amendment and a required continuation. So with that, I'll turn it to Ben Rasmussen or Todd Call. Ben.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start
on the rule. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. This rule is due for its 5-year review, and so we asked staff to go through that and see if any changes were necessary. You'll note that there are 2 drafts. Draft 2 is actually the current rule that you want, or draft that you want to be looking at. The changes that are being proposed, we can just kind of run through those really quick. If you look on lines 52 and onward, there's a request to have more representation from USSA and some of the advisory committees we're working with. USSA worked with Superintendent Dixon, and she's recommended that we add one member from USSA to the Digital Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee. So you see that on lines 58 through 67. We also have language, if you look on down to lines 99 to 100. There is training required of school leaders, and there's a recommendation that we add some language that they can send a designee to attend that training to kind of lessen the burden on them. I think that we have some wording changes on line 119, just for clarification, and I think that's the bulk of the changes there. Todd Call, I think, can answer any questions you have about the rule in this program. So that's what we're looking at, Chair.
Thank you. Todd, do you have anything to add, any additional info or?
I'm happy. I'm Todd Call, Coordinator for Digital Teaching and Learning at USBE, and happy to answer any questions that you have. At the end of the rule, there is one other small change related to reporting requirements. Again, a lot of these changes are intended to lighten the burden on LEAs. We recognize the burden that detail can sometimes place on LEAs in terms of reporting requirements and the application process. So at the end of this, previously there was an annual reporting requirement to report potential cost savings. A statute was changed at the beginning earlier this year to remove that reporting requirement, and this matches that statute and also removing that requirement.
Thanks, Todd, that helps. Any committee questions, committee member questions, discussion? No.
Cindy raised her hand.
Oh, Cindy, please. Cindy,
I just want
I'm
to,
sorry.
this isn't necessarily a question. Is it appropriate to make a comment, or do you want to wait for the motion?
No, of course, we'd love a comment.
Okay, I just want to say I appreciate the reduction of reporting where we can. We accountability and compliance seriously, but you know, when DTL was one of the areas that I know LEAs had some frustrations when you put all the reporting on top of each other. They were feeling that it was becoming unmanageable, and I just appreciate anything we can do to reduce that burden while still maintaining accountability for public dollars, because that's important too. So thank you for that change.
Yeah, thank you. I second that. Any other questions, committee members? Then I don't see any, so Vice Chair Davis, if you'd like to make a motion. Did you say you'd like to?
Yes, I move that the committee continue R277-922 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation on second and final reading.
Continuation and amendment?
I think that's inherent in it. So
Okay, that's understood. Okay, the motion is, I see still no discussion or no questions. The motion is the committee continue R277-922 draft 1 on first reading.
draft 2.
Draft 2, thank you. That the committee continue R277-922 draft 2 on first reading forward to the board for continuation on second and final reading. All in favor, please vote, but not even all in favor. Please vote.
Aye.
Thanks for voting verbally, that helps me. Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 3.3, we have another rule for discussion, R277-318, Teacher Salary Supplement Program. It's an amendment and a continuation discussion, and we'll turn that to Ben Rasmussen for presentation.
Thank you, Chair. We're just asking for an amendment to clarify the application process for teachers going over on year to year so they can continue to receive the supplement. Basically, the way this works is a teacher applies once, and as long as they remain an eligible teacher, they're eligible to receive the supplement without having to apply again. So we've clarified that language so that it can be implemented in our new USIM system and it can be processed properly. And that's what we're looking at with this role. I think Jennifer Thronson is outside and can answer questions if you have them about the program.
Thank you. Committee members, any discussion, any questions? Mr. Highness?
I just have one question. I thought I read on here somewhere, a teacher can step away and then come back.
Yes.
Is there like a time limit on that?
No, as long as they return to an eligible position or they're still qualified, they would get the supplement.
And I had the same question when we were talking about this at our planning meeting, and it seems there's a tracking system that's pretty, it's pretty good. Dr. Hyde, our licensing director, has something to add.
It's on. You're on.
You just can't tell
Oh, it
it's on.
doesn't light up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on.
Hi, Malia Height, Educator Licensing Coordinator. The system, we have a system through IT that tracks whether or not an individual has the appropriate experience and or degree, and then matches that up with the assignment. So it really is just a check and balance within IT, so we can track that indefinitely.
I guess if we find that if we find some glitches or some inappropriate activity, we can rethink our system and maybe tighten it up. This seems a little loose to me, but I'm trying to be convinced that it can be adequately tracked. So,
It really is. With TSSP, the requirements are, does an educator have a degree in that area? So is there a master's or bachelor's degree in the area of special education, in the area of chemistry, in the area of mathematics? And then do they have an assignment within that area using that professional or using that endorsement?
okay, I'm really trying to be convinced. I don't see any other, I don't see any other questions from committee members. No.
You've got a hand from Board Member Davis.
Thank you, sorry. That's okay, not your fault. Go ahead, Member Davis.
There's nothing we can do about this in this meeting, but something to think about for conversations moving forward, legislatively. I know to include teachers on, what used to be ARL types of programs and things. I had a teacher call and ask me to come down to this school where there are, the whole school has students that are, have really advanced needs, really severe types of needs for interventions and such. And they have a really hard time getting anyone to teach there. And, she was there, but on a kind of an alternative situation. And I realized when we had this discussion legislatively, it would have changed it from like 4 million to 10 million or something like that. But I just hope that we'll keep in mind as we, work with our legislators and just remember that we have a lot of people teaching in special education programs that are doing really hard work and taking care of some of our students with the greatest needs, and they're not able to receive this. And again, there's nothing I can do here. And I will really try to stop with the commentary. I realize now on every rule I'm making commentary, and I'll try to stop, but I just hope that we'll keep that in mind as we move forward in our interactions.
I think we appreciate that. I know I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't see any other questions from committee members. So motions, what did you see? And the motion.
I have a
Member
motion,
Booth, thank you.
Chair. Move that the committee continue and approve R277-318 draft 1 on first reading, forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
Any final discussion to that? I see no hands. The motion is that excuse me. The motion is that committee continue and approve R277-318 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading. Please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is item 3.4, another action item on another rule, R277-746, which is a driver education program for Utah schools amendment and continuation. We have Ben Rasmussen to talk to us about that. I'm assuming the driver education
Audrey, I believe, is online.
is online and able to answer any substance specific questions. So that's great. Thank you, Audra, for being here. With that, Mr. Rasmussen.
So the primary change you're going to see is in the rule is just that we're updating the driver's education manual. We incorporate that by reference. And so what you've got in your backup is a new manual that they've gone through, gotten feedback from stakeholders, and also made some changes based on legislation. Audra has given you a crosswalk that shows all the changes that are being made. There was one thing we wanted to clarify on the crosswalk. I think there was one place, Michelle, I don't know if you remember where it was, but there was one place in the crosswalk where she referred to having a driver's license as being a right and not a privilege. And it's actually the other way around. Your driver's license is a privilege and not a right, but that is not in the manual. But we just wanted to point out that that was just kind of a typo. So, any questions you have about the manual, I believe Audra Uri is online and she can answer those. And just adopting the rule would just basically be incorporating this new manual and adopting that.
Thank you. Audra, would you mind telling us just a little bit about what your process is for updating this manual and how often you do it? Because it seems a little bit, I mean, someone could think about driver's ed and it could seem very minimal, but I know it's a really important program to families and parents, and it obviously affects all of our safety. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your process, who you review this with to update it, and how often that happens.
After that, you've got a hand from Board Member Davis.
Thank you. And Cindy, I hope you're okay to hear that first, and then we'll call on you. Audra?
This is Audra Uri. I'm the driver's education specialist there at the Board of Education. And to answer your first question about how often we redo the manual, it just basically depends on law changes usually, or types of events that are occurring that might cause liability for civil or criminal liability or injury to students. And so we try to keep everything updated and current with the laws, statute laws, driver's licensing laws, and then laws through our policies to guide them. As you can see, we had redone the manual in 2011 and then redid the manual in 2018. And when the manual was written in 2018, a lot of the language was taken out, a lot of the specifics, it was very simplified. The same words were there, just more explanation was taken out. And so there's a lot of questions by the LEAs about specifics that need to be put back into the manual to help guide them, because they ask for guidance a lot. The people that are part of the committee are stakeholders such as the driver's licensing office, the Office of Highway Safety, Public Safety, and then also we have a UDETSIA board, which is a driver's education board that there's a board member from every school district on that board. And then any teacher of driver's education that wants to participate in the changes. We had 17 people be part of this committee to update and redo the rules for this section. And Representative Ballard had actually asked for some specific rule changes in our manual so that she didn't legislatively have to change them.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Audra, for that discussion and background. Member Davis had a question.
Oh, you answered my question at the end, Audra, because Representative Ballard had contacted me and I hooked her up with Angie and asked her to coordinate with you. And so I just wasn't sure if that had ever transpired, or if something changed in code, or if we were able to work that out outside of code. So thanks for answering that question.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Any other discussion? I don't see any other committee member hands on Zoom, or there's no one here. I was thinking I had one more question about something about training. I'm looking at the manual. Just let me ask you this while I'm trying to remember my more immediate question, but do you see the number of driver's ed programs increasing, decreasing, and LEAs staying about the same? What do you see, Audra, as you're working with these groups?
We have not had a decrease at all. Actually, as new charters begin, they are starting driver's education programs. We're expanding our programs within school districts of adding online programs, blended programs, and then classroom to help make sure that they reach more students. And each year, Utah is getting more students that need driver's education. We, in the last 2 years, we've actually trained almost 80 brand new driver's ed instructors to keep up with the amount of students that we have in the programs.
Thank you. Thanks for the background. I don't see any other hands. A motion is in order. Mr. Hymas.
I gotta pull it up.
You can read it off the screen.
Can you read it that far?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that the committee continue and approve R277-746 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I don't see any. The motion is that the committee continue and approve R277-746 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading. And again, not part of the motion, but noting that this includes the updates to the manual, which is incorporated by reference. So would committee members please vote on that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Unanimous vote. Moving on. Thank you, Audra, very much. That was helpful, and crosswalks especially helpful. Moving on to item number 5, which is another action item, R277-438, dual enrollment. It's just a continuation of a rule without amendments. So, Ben?
Yeah, so this rule is up for its 5-year review, Chair. This is the rule that governs private school and homeschool students participating in public school programs. That's what the dual enrollment covers. And so their staff has not proposed any substantive changes to the rule, just asking for the rule to be re-upped for another 5 years.
And second, I'm just pulling that out myself.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I noticed that there was no changes to the rule. Were there suggested changes that staff felt weren't necessary, or is everybody just happy with this?
So there's not really any staff members that implement this rule. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, myself both reviewed the rule to see if we had suggestions, and we didn't have anything to recommend. So
Nor do I. I just want you to
I think, just as a comment, I think dual enrollment is working, from my experience and what I observe in working with LEAs, it works pretty well, but it's also becoming kind of blended with other kinds of interrelationships between LEAs, which I don't think is a bad thing. So I'm interested that there aren't any people who have any exact concerns about this, but glad that that's so, and thank you for the work on that. So any other discussion to the motion, or we don't have any discussion, we don't have a motion on the table yet. Any other discussion about the rule or questions? Okay, a motion then, if anybody would like to make that.
Go ahead.
Randy?
All right. I move that the committee continue R277-438 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation on second and final reading.
Any discussion to that motion? Still asking one last time. I see no hands. Thank you. The motion again is that the committee continue R277-438 draft 1 on first reading, forward to the board for continuation on second and final reading. Please vote.
Aye.
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 Thank you. It's unanimous. And moving to the next item, which is another action item, moving just one down. Item 6, which is a repeal or suggested repeal of a previous licensing rule that we're now working into the new licensing structure. This is action item, or yes, R277-502, educator licensing and data retention. Do you have anything to say about that, Ben?
No, you've pretty much said it. We've basically replaced the rule with new licensing rules, so this one's no longer needed.
Thank you. So motion's in order, if anybody would like to make that.
I move that the committee I move that the committee
Opposite.
repeal R277-502 on first reading and recommend the board repeal the rule on second and final reading.
The motion is that the committee repeal R277-502 on first reading and recommend the board repeal the rule on second final reading. Any final discussion to that rule or that suggested action? I see none. So board members, committee members, please vote.
Aye.
Cindy?
Yeah, I said aye.
And Natalie?
I said aye.
Oh, sorry, I missed you. I don't have my helper to the left of me anymore. I mean, immediately to the left, but another one. Not to diminish, but anyway, that is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Pretty easy. We'll move to the next item, which is an action item.
Chair,
Yes. sir.
just so you know, you have Matt Eason online to speak to this. I think he's from the health department.
Oh, thank you. That's always nice to hear from you.
Is it Jeffrey? Jeffrey, you're right.
We'll call him Mr. What's his last
Jeffrey
name?
Eason.
Eason. Okay.
That is all right. Thank you.
Item is a agreement extension request from Salt Lake County Health Department. And Mr. Eason, welcome to the virtual committee, and we'd love to hear from you.
Is Whitney going to cue this up, or is he?
Um,
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, thank
Or-
you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for allowing us to come here and for the partnership over the last school year for supporting our students and keeping schools running smoothly. So I would open it for Dr. Phillips to share any information she would like to.
Sure. This is an agreement that we were asked to extend it. The agreement originally ends October of 2021. This agreement is in place to increase efficiency of data sharing that is entirely permissive to share. Essentially, if Jeffrey can correct me, but the Salt Lake County receives information on COVID cases. They are of students, and they need to verify enrollment of the student. And sometimes that's easy, and sometimes that's not so easy, whether they're going to a school outside of the area in which they live. But the health department does have the student's name information, that COVID positive identification, address, all with, of course, the parent being there with the provider. And they need to, his job is to verify. And what they've been doing before this agreement is contacting nurses across Salt Lake County and asking them to verify, taking up time from nurses that really don't have time to verify. And so we're able to help just confirm enrollment in schools. And so Jeff, did I explain that all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Just introduce yourself for the recording, would you please, Dr.
Oh,
Phillips?
well, Whitney Phillips, Chief Privacy Officer at Utah State Board of Education.
Thank you. And thanks for the explanation. I'm looking to see if there are any hands.
Member Hymas.
Matt.
Yeah, I'm curious, and this is just for Salt Lake County. I guess first off, are there other counties doing the same thing? Or is this just Salt Lake County?
Interesting question. Similar one. Go ahead. Whitney or Jeff, whichever.
The board, actually, the committee last year recommended that we reach out to other county health departments, and we did so, but Salt Lake County is the only one pursuing this type of agreement.
Matt?
Follow up, please. What has this data, excuse me, what has this data done for us? How is it helpful? I read through this, and when it was first approved, it looks like there was some board members who voted no. I'm not sure why, but I thought, well, it'd be valuable to know why we're continuing this. If it has helped, if we're just looking to do things. I know we're all pretty busy, and so we don't want to waste time here. How has this data been helpful?
Thanks.
Please, as the chair, I'd be happy to share a little bit of data regarding the impact that this agreement has had on us.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So since the outset of our agreement in December of 2020, we have had 9,600, well, over 9,600 individuals identified, students identified. And so you can see the volume of cases that have come through and the number of children we would have been calling nurses on to identify. Ultimately, this has resulted in 9,600 potential exposure events that were either shortened in duration because we were able to identify them, or they didn't happen at all. The volume of cases that we saw in the previous school year came out to just over 8,400. So that means over 1,200 cases have been identified so far this school year. We are seeing higher rates in our school-age children this year as well at this time period. And we really see the impact of this data sharing agreement. It is really helping us get ahead of potential exposure events and keeping children safe.
Matt, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, aren't you getting the data through testing anyway? Is the health department getting test results from the schools, or are the schools getting test results from the health department?
It's a great question. So we have generally public health has the authority to collect reportable disease information. So COVID infection is one of those reportable diseases. As such, all laboratories report those results. So public health does know the case status of the children. However, we do not know which schools that they go to, and we don't know which nurses or which districts to work with whenever we do identify a child based off of address. So what we were doing previously was looking at the address and trying to reach out to that school district where the student most likely went to, and then tried to inquire on that student, which potentially had some data privacy issues associated with it. In this way, we are able to receive our reportable information, verify that expeditiously through the enrollment data that this group has sent to us. There is zero opportunity for a security breach whenever we are conducting that linkage. And then as public health, we share that with our medical partners at the school districts, which are school nurses, and we're able to work this process. So the schools are not sharing health information with us. We are sharing, public health is sharing COVID infection status with the schools in an appropriate manner to prevent further infection.
Cal?
Member Klein has raised her hand.
Kind of, just one more follow-up.
Sure,
please.
go ahead.
And maybe this is the USBE staff that I can't remember.
Whitney Phillips.
Whitney, and are schools not reporting to the state their numbers? Are they required to do so, or is that just a recommendation?
Whitney, you know?
I'm not quite sure on that, but I do know that oftentimes the health department is going to know about a student's COVID positive test before the school would know because, you know, the providers are required to provide that information to the Salt Lake County Health Department and all of the other health departments. And so eventually, with this mechanism that Jeff described, they're able to verify enrollment. But if you can imagine the 9,600 students that doing that one by one, contacting the nurses by phone call or email, having them respond, it might take some time. Whereas this data sharing agreement allows for the health department to have access to enrollment of students so that they're able to contact the school within minutes rather than it taking sometimes weeks.
One more question. I'm willing to wait, but if I could.
No, go ahead, you might as well.
I'm just-
And I know that you have your hand up, Natalie, and I have a follow-up to that point too, as soon as Matt's finished.
Yeah, just the data you're looking for, and please explain to me or help me understand, because I just don't understand. You're looking for, one, it's only in Salt Lake County, which I think is severely limited for what we're seeing throughout the state. But you're looking for a name, date of birth, and gender instead of just numbers. Can you help me? I mean, I get the age. I think that's very important. The name, does that matter? And the gender, on your professional knowledge, has it affected gender differently? I might be behind the studies.
Matt, Whitney, whichever.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
Thank you. So, council member, we use the name and date of birth to create an opportunity for linkage across different data sets. So through our surveillance data, which is the testing information that we receive, we receive name, date of birth, gender, address. We collect those reportable variables as dictated in statute. In order to link and understand which child is infected in which school they go to, we need to have their name and their date of birth, and gender adds a level of precision to it so that we can ensure that we are matching the correct people. So the data elements that we're requesting are in order to allow us to do a linkage.
So just to follow up quickly to what Whitney said a few minutes ago, this is enrollment information that we're sharing, which seems very benign. And then the only more sensitive information is the student's address and birth date and gender, all in an attempt to make sure you get the right Aaron Jones or other name that might be, that might cut across genders or birthdays.
Board Member Lear, we don't typically have student address. That's information that the Salt Lake County Health Department gets directly from the students, and I assume their parent. And so we're not matching on address. The health department gets from the parent, the student's, the child's name, date of birth, and gender. All we're doing, and they know that they're in Salt Lake County Health Department because Salt Lake County got that information. They're just matching with our records to identify the enrollments of the student so that we know which school that they attend, so that Jeff's group can reach out and let the nurses know of that COVID positive student and hopefully reduce additional cases.
And get the right student. Natalie had a question. Member Klein?
Thank you. I just had a question on the numbers that you've been sharing. Is that specifically students that have tested positive? Or is that, and if so, are those symptomatic cases or non, or are you including possible exposures in that number as well? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah.
Thank you, council member. So Chair, the council member is looking at whether or not we are following up on cases of infection or contacts to those cases. And at this time, we are only talking about individuals who have tested positive for COVID-19. So those are cases, and we are not attempting to identify or notify around the contacts to those cases. So this is purely people who have tested positive, are known to public health. And to get back to and to add to what Dr. Phillips was saying, through our communicable disease rule, laboratories and healthcare providers, really anyone that has knowledge of a communicable disease, which is reportable by statute, must share specific reportable data elements with public health. And as such, laboratories and the positive tests that we receive, those in a high percentile, in the 90s, 90 percentile, contain all address information, gender, demographic information. So we have that type of information already. And just adding to what Dr. Phillips said, we really are only trying to understand where these children, these individuals, go to school so that we can coordinate decreasing the opportunity for exposures in that individual school from that individual student.
Thanks. Is this adults and students, or is this just students?
I do not have the records on employees at the school, just students through this partnership. So we are only focusing on students with this.
Thank you. Member
Chair,
Davis?
I was just going to say the specific data you can see on the screen, what's in the contract.
Oh, yeah, that's helpful. They put the data on the screen to show us
That's the scope of it.
the scope of the agreement. And Cindy, you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate the clarification on the address, because that was my concern, that we were giving out the name of a student and the student's address. And I was like, why are we doing that? But sounds like you get that information anyway, but from different sources, and that's something completely separate from us, which would be, more appropriate. So thanks for that clarification. And it sounds like, this is the information you would have to get prior to this agreement anyway. It's just you're taking the school nurse really kind of out of the equation, freeing up the school nurses to spend their time caring for kids rather than spending their time doing all this clerical back and forthing. For you to do what you need to do. So I think I'm understanding that correctly, and appreciate you for coming and helping to clarify.
Thank you, council member. And I want to point out that freeing up the school nurse time is definitely our priority here. But they are not out of the equation. They are hand in hand with us and have been an amazing asset through this entire response. So I want to credit those nurses for that effort.
Right. But now they're doing more on the back end and less on the, trying to look up who's going to what school and yada, yada, that stuff. And
absolutely.
Thank you. That's great. Is it Mr.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, yeah. Before we have a motion, we have one more question from Mr. Pymus. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Did you mention that using the name is helpful when linking with other data? If I'm correct on hearing that correctly, can you share with us what other data you would link that to?
Yeah, the only other data that I'm linking that to, council member, is the surveillance data that we receive from positive COVID test results. And I'd like to point out to this committee that all of the data that is transmitted securely through an encrypted service. It is stored on a private drive that is located in my bureau, and I have personal control over who has access to that. And I can assure you that we have one analyst that conducts this linkage, and none of this information is shared outside of that analyst.
Thank you. And one more, we keep pestering you with one more thing and one more thing, but is this the kind of agreement that if, God help us, this pandemic ends, the agreement will end? Is that anticipated? It's a temporary or a time limited agreement, is that right?
I can answer that. Right now, the agreement's just to extend for a year, but within all of our agreements with USBE, all data sharing agreements, USBE can choose at any time to terminate an agreement. And so that is something that we've written in. And so if there are bad actors out there, we can terminate agreements immediately and request immediate destruction of the data and access to the data. So not just this one. It's not based on if the pandemic ends. It's if USBE determines that they would like to terminate early, they can.
Thank you. That is super helpful. I see your note too, Whitney, that you can't see Angie or hear Angie because she's not here, but I don't know if that was from before. We'll address if she comes back. I think we have a motion by Member Booth. Thank you.
I move that the committee approves the agreement extension request from Salt Lake County Health Department.
The motion is that the committee approves the agreement extension request from Salt Lake County Health Department. Any other lingering questions? Committee members, please vote.
Aye.
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 No.
That would be 4-1, and the no is Natalie Klein. Thank you. Thanks for that discussion. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all council members.
Thanks for your expertise. We are moving on to an information discussion of the Interstate Compact for teacher certification. So we have with us Dr. Malia Height, Dr. Jennifer Franson. Malia's in the room with us here, just for your information. Jennifer's I think outside, but not that that matters. Would you like to speak first or Jennifer, however you want?
I think Jennifer is multi-meeting tasking.
Okay.
So we'll, oh, perfect. I'm Malia Hyde, I'm an educator licensing coordinator. And today we're going to be sharing some information around an interstate teaching compact, which is work that all of the states nationwide are working on, and we'll be working on with the Utah State Board of Education. So first we want to start with what is an interstate compact. And an interstate compact is something that currently exists in a lot of different areas in the state of Utah. And if we go to the next slide, this is who's leading this work. It's the National Center for Interstate Compacts and the Council of State Governments. And there are over 250 participants that attended a kickoff for the Interstate Compact for Teaching, and that was just in June. So when we look at what a compact is, it's a legal contract between two or more states. And so it allows you to use your privileges in other states. A great example is a driver's license. So if I take my Utah driver's license and drive into Nevada, which I will likely do this weekend during a trip to St. George, I have the right to drive under Nevada law because I have my Utah driver's license. And so it helps the state to maintain their sovereignty over their issues, but also allows us to respond to all of our national priorities. And in the state of teaching, we are able to have a lot of benefits from this kind of a compact. So currently in the state of Utah, there are, and you can see the data here on the slide, there are 40 states that have adopted at least one compact. 28 states have at least 3 compacts. The state of Utah has 6. And it has the most interstate compacts of any state of the nation. We really are leading the way in this move. And a lot of the things that currently are under interstate compacts are things like nursing licenses and other professional licenses. Yeah. So when we look at, here are the 6 that are under development in the state of Utah. And you can see these are ones that are not yet in existence, but are being worked on. So nursing already exists within the state of Utah, but we are looking to extend the interstate compact so that massage therapists who are licensed in other states can come to Utah and practice massage therapy, which I am in support of. So you can see there that K-12 teaching is one of the things that we are working towards. And so here are some of the benefits that we have related to a licensure compact for teachers. One is that there is an agreement on what the requirements are. So today they're in the 50 states and many other jurisdictions. There are lots of different requirements for what makes you a qualified teacher. And they are as varied as the number of states. There's almost no 2 identical state requirements. And so it makes for challenges as teachers are more portable than they used to be. And especially now, as teachers now can provide services and instruction online. Just because a teacher is qualified in the state of Pennsylvania doesn't mean they meet our requirements in Utah. And so this licensure compact would allow for all of the states who participate to have a common understanding and definition of what is qualified. It also includes a data system where we can share that information. And so if somebody has an elementary K-8 license in the state of Utah, then it will also tell us which other states that educator is qualified to teach in. It really is helping us to think more collaboratively with other state boards and teacher commissions throughout the nation, and allows us to be able to ensure that students have the safety that they need from their teachers. So if we look at the different phases of a compact development, there really are 3 phases. And we are just barely eking into the first step. And the first step is that there's a technical assistance group that consists of 20 different state officials and stakeholders, and our own superintendent, Sydney Dixon, is serving on this particular technical assistance group for the Interstate Licensing Compact. And they are going to just start with the very beginning of understanding the current state of policy in regard to educator licensing. And then once they understand the structures that are in place, they will make recommendations as to what they believe the content might look like. There are many, many stages. We're probably 1.5 years away from bringing some sort of a proposal to the board. It will take time. We do have a little later in the slides that there's a timeline. So here really is the benefit for us in Utah, is that it allows for us to more, I don't want to say easily, though it would reduce burden on staff and our system, but it increases the ability for educators to be portable throughout the United States. One of the greatest things about this very defined reciprocity is that it is a great benefit for military spouses. Can you go to the next?
Yeah.
A very cute family, just so excited.
Is that Scott?
It's not, but it looks like it could be Scott. They have the same hairdo.
Special features. right?
Yes, no.
Oh, sorry. Good thing I'm not.
So in the state of Utah, actually, we're one of very few states, I think fewer than 3, that have a state code related to reciprocity for military spouses. And so anybody who is a military spouse of active duty military who is stationed here in Utah, if their spouse has a license in another state, then they get to teach here. But this is one of the bigger drivers for this interstate compact, because we have so many that rely on that second income for our military families. So here are some of the big points that we need to remember as we continue this conversation, is that public education is the largest profession in the United States. Over 3.3 million educators, which is significant. It's also the most heavily regulated profession. And we have not only local requirements, but also state and federal laws that regulate this. And it's very complicated. And even though we in Utah have made great strides in simplifying our licensing structure and process, and continue to try and find ways to simplify burdens on educators and LEAs, there are many regulations. And so as we look at all of the different jurisdictions, there are different kinds of licenses and certificates and tiers and levels, and it makes, when we're reviewing out-of-state applicants for the state of Utah licensure, it gets a little tricky and into the weeds quite easily. So if we can go to the next slide. There are interstate agreements, and then there are interstate compacts, and they're not the same. So an interstate agreement is something that is managed by one group, and it's informal, and you can't really enforce it. It's more of a kind of like a handshake deal. It's like, oh, well, if we agree to do that, it's fine. Whereas an interstate compact is on the books. It is.
You've got a question from Board Member Davis when you have a positive point.
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention to.
Well, I just like, but go ahead, Millie, just finish your sentence.
Okay.
I hear a thought, and then we'll go to.
Sure. It really is something that's enforceable, that is, it's a contract, and really is a very black and white state of things that supports both teachers as well as licensing jurisdictions. So I'll pause now for Board Member Davis.
Davis, I glanced away and you raised your hand.
Sorry, I had my hand up to ask a question at the end of this slide. So do you want to finish this slide and then I'll ask my question?
Well, really, this is
Answer it at the end of the slide.
No, you just turned it off.
You're off now.
You're on.
Now you're on. Now you're on.
From my perspective, I can't see the light
I
on
know.
my microphone. So this really was the end of my discussion, is that an agreement is not, you can't really enforce it very well, but an interstate compact it's a compact and it's enforceable.
Okay. Cindy, do you want to speak now? And then I have a question about that as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this interstate agreement would be something akin to our reciprocity agreements that we currently have. And do we have those with all 50 states? We do, I think, right? Are there some states we don't have reciprocity agreements with right now?
So the interstate agreement that exists through the National Association of State Directors of Teacher and Educator Certification is something where each state defines what their licensing structure is in each of their certifications, aligned to a national standard. And then we just agree that we have that national standard. So there's not an implied reciprocity per se. We in the state of Utah don't have any kind of reciprocity agreement with any other state. We have this interstate agreement, which says if you have a professional level license in the state of Utah, then that means you have a professional level license in this state. It's the equal level. It means you've finished a preparation program and you're ready to go. In some states, they have higher levels of licenses where you have completed your master's degree, and that impacts your state licensure. That is not something that exists in Utah. So the interstate agreement really is just saying, we have these licenses here and it aligns this way to our the national standard.
Can I follow?
Help? Go ahead.
So, so if a teacher moves here from, Arizona, and the teacher has a license in Arizona, the teacher can come here and teach if they do our extra requirements, or the teacher can just come here and teach, or how does that work currently? And then I'm gonna have one more question after that follow up, Chair. If you want me to wait, I will, but it's a long.
Well, go ahead, let's answer this. This is very similar to my question. Go ahead.
Great. So according to our current system and state code, if a teacher has a professional level license in another state or jurisdiction, meaning they aren't waiting to complete requirements, it's not temporary, it's not provisional, it's not emergency, then they are granted a professional level license in the state of Utah.
Currently.
This is currently.
Okay.
So if someone comes from Arizona with a professional license to teach elementary school, they get a Utah educator license to teach elementary school. The only thing that we're seeing some variability with that is within the content areas, because oftentimes in other states, the content requirements for an endorsement are take this test. And if you take this test, then we'll give you an endorsement. And the state of Utah has defined competencies for each content area. And that may or may not include a test, but it always includes content specific pedagogy, which is not the same or equitable to these other states systems. So they will get a license, but they may end up with an associate level endorsement until they meet, usually it's 1 or 2 things that they have to show competency in until they get that professional level endorsement.
Okay,
Does that make
total sense. Can I ask one last follow-up, Chair?
Yes.
So, I think I've mentioned this before, but when I was running just to be on this board and I was going around meeting everybody, and I thought my biggest comments were going to come from like some hot button item in 10 years ago, like Common Core or something. And I was surprised they were all, the majority of them were frustrations over licensing. And this is before you were ever here. So you get to step in and inherit all these frustrations that people are having out there. And so I guess I'm just wondering, it sounds like this, especially in those endorsement areas, and that's where people just are like, but I could teach this there, but now I can't teach this here, and we have maybe higher standards. Or it sounds like this is going to help streamline some of that and ease the frustration, so we can get more teachers in classrooms teaching sooner, with them still meeting our high expectations. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes. That's absolutely correct. We would definitely still maintain our standards, but we would have a clearly delineated structure for what exists in other states is equivalent to this in the state of Utah.
Thank you.
So I don't see any questions from the gentleman here, but I have a connected question, both to your earlier comparison of agreement and compact, and then also, but just also for an example. So I think we teach Utah history in fourth grade or fifth grade. Always fourth. So if a person's coming from, you know, North Dakota or Maine or whatever, how is that teacher qualified to teach Utah history in fourth grade?
Yeah, this is actually a problem that we're seeing also at the secondary level, is that a Utah history course, university course is required for the secondary social studies endorsement. But correct, if you're coming from, you know, another state or another country, you're not going to be an expert in Utah history like me. I'm not. No, I am a daughter of a Utah pioneer. So it's one of those things that we say you have the competencies to learn and interpret historical documents. And so then in that way, we're saying you're prepared to teach history. You just may have to do some quick brushing up on Utah specific history.
So to kind of try to simplify that answer, somebody comes in July and wants to get a teaching job for fourth grade. Can she get that? Is she qualified to get that teaching job? Right. Okay. But when she has to do her Utah history unit, it would be up to the LEA to make sure that she has enough background.
Today, we are saying.
Can I speak to this one?
Yes.
Having been an elementary teacher, even our current educator Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning, even our current preparation programs aren't preparing elementary teachers to teach Utah studies. They're teaching them how to teach social studies. And then as they're having to skill up, as Malia said, I moved to Alaska and taught fourth grade, which was Alaska studies. You just kind of have to learn, but you knew how to teach social studies. You were just applying the new content that you were learning. Right. So that would be very similar to this kind of compact of kind of acquiring it at least a day or two ahead of your kids.
Okay, so it is just the way I would have to teach sixth grade math. I just have to learn it a couple of.
You've got it. Because we're generalists in elementary school, and so when I learn math, I'm learning K6 math. I'm not necessarily ready to teach percentages, but I'm going to be prepared before I get to teaching it that day. I know the general principles of teaching mathematics, same with social studies.
Okay, so that helps me. Cindy, did that maybe follow up on your question? I'm not sure. The other question I had, though, I'm still trying to get to understand the difference between the NASTEC compact, and I always thought it was a compact that was in place for, that's been in place for 20, 30-ish years, and this interstate agreement, why they just can't be combined, sort of.
They achieve different things. So for the NASDAQ, it's saying, is this teacher a risk to you in your organization because they have some kind of flag in a different state, which is super helpful to know so that we don't hire someone who maybe has lost their license in another state but isn't claiming to have done so. This is more about portability of that license. So if you do have an eligible license, would you be able to come to our state without any huge lift to be able to transfer that license to Utah? So that it's similar to, you probably talked about like the nursing, and so I can go from state to state and not have to take the exam again or something like that. I can say I was proven eligible in this state and now I'm eligible in this state, which will add its own challenges for sure. But in general, the NASDAQ agreement has been more about the safety and security of students and to make sure those licenses are valid and haven't been contested in some way. Or this is more about just the portability of the license.
Well, or maybe just to see if I'm accurate in saying it's more about the sufficiency of the license and not just the ethical components or qualifications.
That's a great way to compare the two.
Okay, I was just trying to understand why we need both.
Yep.
I can't see the places where we can raise hands anymore. So Cindy or Natalie, do you have?
She still has one slide. I don't know if you want.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. And I have also pulled up the participants so I can see hands now.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so go ahead, Malia.
Well, the last thing is just our anticipated timeline. And like I said earlier, we had the the practitioner kickoff, which had over 250 participants in June. The first meeting of our technical assistance group is in later this month. It's September, my goodness. So it's just in a few weeks. And again, Dr. Dixon will be attending that. Then they're going to be working on this for the next several months, and the drafting team will be getting suggested language to the field early next spring, and then late spring, it's going to be released for public comment. So that just gives you the timeline of when we anticipate things happening.
And you already said this, but just so you all know, this will go to the legislature for their recommendation or acceptance. It actually doesn't come to the board for.
Interstate compacts have to be adopted by the legislature. They are part of the law.
So you'll probably want to inform the legislature, but ultimately it is their decision as to whether we go into this type of agreement.
Any other, this is just an information item, so we don't need to vote on or motion, but any other questions?
Board member Klein has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead. Board member Klein, committee member.
So yeah, I like the idea of the convenience that it creates for teachers that are coming and going. So don't get me wrong. My concern lies in how this might tie our hands as a state as far as being able to make our own decisions about licensing if we feel like we need to go a different direction, or if there's something better. We don't necessarily want to be tied into the compact and some of the things that it may dictate. That's, if at some point we want to make changes to our structure, are we bound and unable to do that because of the compact if we were to agree to that?
Raises a good question. Malia or Jennifer, one of you like to?
I'm unsure. It would be a legislative move to change if they do accept. So it could be something that we put through a policy request that they no longer accept the interstate compact if they do choose to do so. As we see what the draft is, we as staff will bring you the draft for your own information and understanding, and that way you can be informed to be able to inform the legislature on the board's opinion of this type of compact. But the flexibility for the legislature, it would just need to be a legislative change to get out of that compact agreement.
You've got a couple hands up. I can see.
Cindy or Natalie, do you have any follow-up on that?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you. And Member Davis?
I had the same question, and I was just thinking, I guess, I hope as they work through these issues that they're looking at just the basic levels that need to be met to be excellent in pedagogy and content. And I know that's going to be subject to opinion, but our opinion shapers that are going to be at the table, I hope that we'll share, that opinion with them, that we don't need 49 million things on this. Let's just get what does good pedagogy look like, and what do you need to know to be able to teach good content, or what should the practice, whatever it is we decide, but that we don't add in tons of extra stuff, because then I think it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Is going to defeat the purpose, because then you get every state who thinks something a little different about some different issue, and then it's going to get harder and harder to get everyone on board and then create this flexibility that we're seeking. I said I wasn't going to add any more commentary if it wasn't a question. Can I turn that into a question? So could you just share that with whoever's going to be at the table? There's the question.
It doesn't really, and I kind of didn't catch, I think maybe Malia did. Did you catch the question part of it? This is an opportunity for commentary as I see it, because it's a discussion item. So go ahead, Malia, do you have any response to members? Davis's?
Research only can share that information with Dr. Dixon, and she works with the TAG group for sure.
It might be noted that the state, Utah actually has one of the highest frequencies of interstate compacts. So we have 6, which is unusual compared to other states. So the likelihood that this could come up as an acceptable option, we definitely want to have a voice in that conversation. And it's terrific that Superintendent Dixon has been invited to be part of that technical advisory committee.
Sure.
You've got a hand from.
Yeah, see, Member Klein, did you have another
Yes.
question?
Well, yeah, just to follow up, I guess my biggest concern is that we as a state board will end up being dictated to instead of being able to make the decisions that are best for Utah based on what's coming from a more nationalized, centralized entity. Whereas, with other licenses, like healthcare workers and such, that is not as big of concern. But when we're very big on local control and education and making decisions for our students based on our values here in Utah. I think it's a different animal altogether because it affects the teaching of our students and the children of the state. And so in that regards, it's very different, and we need to be able to maintain local control and parent voice, and our voice as board members as well, to be able to make decisions that are best for Utahns. So that's just something to consider again as we look at this. Do we really want more centralized power? Like the U.S. Department of Education, we already have so much dictated to us that it very much limits our ability to make decisions locally. And I see that this could possibly push us in that direction even further. So just my comment.
Great, thanks. Just to take the priority of the chair to make a comment, I can see some tension here, that there's some good and bad, some give and take in accepting this compact. But I have a short question for Malia or Jennifer, and then I have a comment. But so Malia, is this if a teacher comes from another state, does she have a right to this license, or is it just she has the opportunity? I'm trying to figure out is there some right, and then we have to negotiate if we say no, based on some reason we're not going to license you. How does that look?
So a lot of those details would be worked out within the compact itself.
Okay.
For example, one of the standards that's different in the state of Utah to other states is that the level of background check and what is an allowable offense in the state of Utah is very different than many other states. And so those kinds of things would have to be worked out, and it's possible that within the compact, we say you still have to meet the state's background check standard. And it also wouldn't be for all licenses. It would only be for the professional, fully licensed, completed the preparation. We would still have the ability to have our preparatory or provisional licenses as well as LEA specific.
Okay, thank you. And just add a little bit of comment to that question. And Natalie, I see you have another question, but my additional comment to that is I have wrestled with this for a number of years, and I used to be sort of more territorial and protective and say, no, it's got to be a Utah preparation and a Utah teacher. But as the numbers of qualified teachers have declined, the numbers of prepared teachers, and now we're to the point of almost letting people walk into the classroom and be on a teacher preparation path. I've decided that I would prefer a teacher prepared, well prepared, as you say, to a professional level in North Dubuque than I would to somebody not prepared at all. And that's just my preference. I feel like we're sacrificing, I think we're getting professional preparation, which I really value and think is important. And I know we are now going to have to struggle with, does the person understand Utah laws? Does the person understand even the personality, which is probably true of other states too. Anyway, go ahead, Natalie, another question, or did you just take your hand down?
I just took my hand down.
Oh, thank you. Any closing thoughts or comments? This is just an information item. you want to move right on to the next one, which is also yours to talk about, or Jennifer, I'm not sure. Jennifer and Melinda talk about micro credentials.
Yes, I'm actually doing this with Katie Hill, who should
Oh,
be
never
online.
mind.
She's right behind
You're
me.
off the hot seat.
Malia may want to add if you don't mind,
Sure.
because from a licensing perspective. it might be-
Is this mine?
Yeah,
I believe so.
And then just turn it on and you won't be able to tell.
Are you
It's
sharing?
got this
if you want to run it, you can just use my mouse.
Yes, you
And then I
want
push this
to turn it off.
Hi, the first time.
We're
Like
going
I'm
to
giving
introduce
anybody
ourselves.
check-in.
Jennifer Thompson, Director of Teaching and Learning, and I'm here with
Katie Dewey Hill. I'm an educator development specialist in teaching and learning, and I work with instructional coaching and the professional learning standards.
Thank you. So we are just here to provide information as micro-credentials in our state are becoming a thing, and we wanted to make sure that the board was aware of what micro-credentials are, how we'll be using them, and just kind of start to inform, as you'll likely hear more about micro-credentials in the near future, and would love for you to just be able to answer questions or know where to direct folks as they might have their own questions.
Scroll down if we
Oh, that's a scroll, it's a PDF. All right, here we go. So basics of what are micro-credentials. They are meant to be, they're not courses. I want to start there with what they're not, because oftentimes they are confused with it's just a course. It's actually an opportunity for our educators to demonstrate their competence through evidence that they submit to show that they have the competence of what's being measured. So we have done this in our micro-credentials are being built right now for some of our endorsements. So in the past, you might have had to take a particular course at the university to have that seat time and that grade to say, I have this knowledge. Well, micro-credentials move past the knowledge gaining kind of perspective to a skill demonstration. So it's insufficient to only demonstrate knowledge. You actually have to apply the knowledge with the skills required to teach that and impact student learning. So the goal of micro-credentials is to impact student learning. That if I have the competencies that I was supposed to develop and acquire, I will have better impact on student learning. So all of ours are beyond knowledge. They require knowledge and skill development, and they are credit bearing. There is USB credit associated with those. They're trackable. You get a little digital badge. We call them micro-credentials and not badges. That might be another term you hear because I have a concern about the badges you have for like Girl Scouts. I want to elevate the profession. Right, like, but you do get these digital icons that you can put on your signature to show the skill sets that you have demonstrated competence in. In our micro-credentials, those include a preparation and planning piece of a micro-credential, an implementation where you go and show your knowledge and skills in the classrooms with students and demonstrate through student work samples or other pieces of evidence. And then finally, a reflection. What did the teacher kind of learn through that experience and what would they change for next time? Just those basic reflection pieces. So it's really meant to lean on evidence rather than I've been given the opportunity to learn. Now I know how to use what I've learned pieces. So in some cases, our educators might need to take a course in order to earn a micro-credential. In other cases, they might already have competence. And this allows them to demonstrate that competence without going through maybe a costly pathway of going through a course. They have this $20 option to demonstrate their competence through a micro-credential. So that's kind of the basics of what they're comprised of. And, oh, I have to remember I'm on your computer. I apologize. I'm like multitasking, like, no. How do people develop the skills? So when you're thinking of micro-credentials, it is not a course. It does not have any content to say, here are the things we want you to know. It just says, here are the competencies we expect. Do you have that evidence to be able to share that you do have those skills? So basically we have people who have been in work experience. They might be paraprofessionals who are like, I've been doing this for 6 years. Let me show you my competence through a micro-credential. Might have been through PLCs. A lot of our educators engage in professional learning communities where they advance their practice together on a certain topic, and now they can demonstrate their competence in this way. Self-directed. We have lots of educators, as you can expect, that have areas that they want to know more about. And so it's an opportunity for them to have taken what they learned on their own and get kind of this evidence that they have competence in that area that may not be documented in a different way. And then accumulation of learning through graduate courses. We have USU, for example, is going to be weaving micro-credentials into their endorsement classes. So not only are the folks going to take the endorsement, but they're also going to have to demonstrate their competence through the micro-credential. And we're seeing that kind of potential in a lot of our higher education institutions to really leverage micro-credentials as part of the coursework to get at that demonstration. So instead of just knowledge gaining, that there's a demonstration and application of the knowledge and skills that have been developed in those courses. So I believe this is where we transition. So Katie's going to take over and I'll do the scrolling. Oh, I'm going to give you the scroll power. Oh, it's transferable.
Portable.
That's right.
Can't drink it. So, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk with you all today, so I'm really happy to be here in person. What these do, like, this is the, why are we doing micro-credentials? Why create another mechanism in addition to the coursework that we have already provided, is that it really gives teachers a way to have a personalized approach, you know, that the competency or what we're focusing on, it's not how you learn it, it's what you can do with what you know. And this also helps support professional learning in a way that gives those courses that really have a strong base in building the knowledge and the shared understanding of the concepts or the skills to have an extension too. So I know that I personally have developed professional learning courses where we wanted to also have micro-credentials available as well, so they could extend their learning and be able to show some leadership in applying that skill, which hopefully will help extend to the learning community that they work with as well. And it also just provides a direct connection to what they're learning in professional learning to the skills that they're using with their students. And so, because that's the goal of all professional learning, that's the reason we make that investment in the first place, is to impact practice. And that's what the micro-credential can do. And the incentive for teachers is that they also get recognized for that in earning USBE credit for each micro-credential earned. And currently, each micro-credential is worth a half of the USBE credit. And in many districts, that is worth advancement on the salary schedule so that they're able to, grow in their salary as well. So there's a lot of incentive for them to earn these, but it also helps strengthen their ability to contribute to their LEAs as well. So I'm sorry, I'm scrolling.
Scrolling, I believe. Yep.
Scrolling with it. I'm
Great.
sorry. Scrolling with delay.
Right.
And so for districts and charters, it really helps them to also support what our main goal an important goal in our USBE strategic plan, that all students have access to a highly qualified educator. It really makes it a very scalable way for districts and charters who are working on building stronger structures of professional learning to be able to leverage those micro-credentials in a way that helps support their efforts and what they're doing. It also gives them a way to see if their investment in professional learning is making an impact in the classroom. So this evidence that the micro-credentials demand demonstrates those pieces as well, and that we don't have to take them out of the classroom. This is really job embedded professional learning that can be demonstrated through those pieces. And it honors the professionals who are working in their districts and charters, that their professional learning goals and priorities are able to be leveraged in that piece. It encourages that self-directed learning that we hope all of our educator professionals have. So I'm gonna go on here cautiously with the scrolling here.
Oh, you know what, let's pause for a second if that's okay.
Do you want to take questions? I wasn't
see
sure.
a question from member Klein.
Okay.
Natalie?
Yes, so who provides these micro credentials? Is it a company that they go through? Is there a certain, or is it USBE that is putting these together for them to earn? Where do these come from?
May I answer that, Chair?
Sure, please.
So yes, it is actually a state-run organization, so it's through our office. We partner with Davis School District to actually put them in our MIDAS system, but ultimately all of the micro-credentials are approved by staff and developed by local educators. So we aren't currently partnered with any vendors in this space other than the platform to have the micro-credentials posted. All of the development is done locally through our LEA educators and staff.
Okay, so follow-up question. You said this is embedded professional learning. So does this fall under the new Rule R277-328 that was just created as far as creating transparency for parents?
So what we mean by embedded professional learning is they're doing it while they're in schools. So it's just part of their work day. Instead of being having to get a substitute and be outside of the school day, they're actually able to kind of take what they're learning and implement it in the school system, if that makes more sense.
So, but it is professional learning, so it would fall under R277-328 as far as what is okay and what is not
Yes.
okay.
Oh, absolutely. I think everything falls under that rule, but yes.
Okay, and that can be requested by parents to see those trainings. That's for
There's no
micro-credentialing.
training associated, so there's nothing to.
It's not an equity training.
No, there's no training. It is
It's an
you
endpoint.
submit your assignment of, I planned this lesson, I implemented this lesson, I reflected on this lesson, here's my evidence of implementation. But there's not actually any content that we deliver in the micro-credential, if that makes sense. So I guess it wouldn't be eligible.
Self-generated, is that? what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So we
it's like
tell them,
self-study.
we need a lesson plan, and they create the lesson plan and template and they send it to us. That we say, show us implementation. So they might use, anonymous student work samples to say, here's how it went with my students, and here's the reflection to go with it. So it's all teacher generated. There's no content coming from us.
So
other than what you have to.
Is there a list of the micro-credentials they can earn and what they have to do to, what they have to implement in order to earn it? That
Yes,
is
those are
available
on
for us
Midas
to view?
platform. So
Okay.
USBE has a partnership with Midas. And so our Midas, I think it's usbe.midaseducation.com. All of our micro-credentials are posted on that site.
Okay, thank you.
Natalie, also, Angie Stallings had something to add to the discussion.
Thank you, Chair Lear. I'm Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. R277328 is really more about professional learning related to educational equity. So if one of the micro-credentials did have something to do with educational equity, then yes, R277328 would apply. But if the micro-credential is simply about
We have Google Suite.
using
Google Suite in the
learning how to
classroom.
use Google Suite is a good example. That it's not likely to fall under R277328, if that is helpful for another client.
Thank you.
And Cindy, I see you have a question. Let me just ask a quick one that reflects back on our previous discussion of Utah history. So if a teacher needed more greater understanding content about Utah history, she could do her self-study and then submit something that would kind of become micro-credential.
Yes.
Did I say that right?
That's our new path.
And that's the time, like, so you don't submit a micro-credential as your process for learning, you're submitting it once it's learned. Like, so the idea is that you're ready to submit to show that you're competent now, whereas a course would be more of developing that competency. So this is demonstrating an already developed competency.
And to add to that, we just redid 41 of the endorsements to include, some of them include micro-credentials. And so, for example, social studies does have a micro-credential pathway that will be developing these micro-credentials. So if somebody wants to say, I know about Utah studies, I'm well-versed due to my background, I've done some self-study, whatever it might be, they can go the micro-credential pathway route instead of the coursework pathway. So we're trying to afford kind of this personalized option of how much knowledge and skills you already have, and let us allow you to demonstrate competence. It's our way of modeling for teachers what we're looking for them to model for students. When do we afford the opportunity for students to show, I already know this before you even get into it? And we're trying to model that through micro-credentials for teachers, because some of our teachers have competence that we haven't recognized in this way before, and micro-credentials really allow that pathway of, I already know this, let me show you.
I'm finally understanding this. Thank you. Member Davis. Member.
Yeah, I really appreciate, I love the idea of micro-credentialing for professional development. I have for the last handful of years. I'm glad we're getting this going. I just was wondering, and even before I ask my question, I'll say it's kind of like sorry to say this, Carol, because I know you have issues, but kind of the Western governors sort of philosophy that if you come to get a degree in business, let's say you're a project manager in your job and you're coming to get a master's degree in business, you can show competency, that you understand the principles of project management by demonstrating them. I already know this stuff, instead of having to take a 4-month, 3-credit course in project management. When you actually are already an expert in project management, you can show that you already understand that. So I think there's real value in doing this, and value in time and money saved too, quite frankly. But my question is this: I know that I can go into Midas and review all of these things, but I'm just going to take the easy road right now and just ask you the question: how much educator voice is in what they can use to show evidence that they actually know, understand, or can implement this, skill or whatever it is that we're looking for? Could you just give us, is it look different for every micro credential, or is it there's this specific set of evidence pieces that they have to submit, or there's this like list of choices of things they can submit, or is it wide open, submit whatever you want and show us you know this stuff?
Good question.
There's,
Yeah.
we saw the list of ways that they can get the information, but I had this conversation with an external educator provider for K-12, and he said, well, the parent sends in a journal saying, my kid did these activities. But that's so different from an educator being able to see a skill or a competency demonstrated to actually know what the child can and can't do. And now we're talking about adult learning, but can you just give us an idea overall of kind of what's the options are to show evidence?
Let me give you a sample, if I can. It says I'm sharing.
Well, I've got this in the room. You're on Zoom.
Got you. Okay, so
Do you want me to log off
as
this too?
board members, if they're in the Zoom, okay, perfect.
I can.
So within the micro-credentials, there is some variability. What we found early on is that we left it wide open, and that was too open. The feedback from the field was, we're not happy with these, they're not rigorous enough. And so we built a micro-credential working group that comes together and advises, like, what should it be? What should the kind of non-negotiable pieces be? And so that group has landed on these, and we've brought them to the community for feedback before we did the final vetting. But basically, they have to have 3 pieces of required evidence at a minimum, and they have to have 1 in each area that you see on the screen, which is preparation and planning, implementation, and reflection. So in preparation and planning, the designer of the micro-credential chooses either a lesson plan is required, a unit plan is required, learning intentions and success criteria and evidence base is required, or the data to inform instruction. Like, what pre-assessment information are they using? What student work samples are they leaning on to say, this is where I need to go with my instruction? So that's the preparation and planning. Then you move to implementation. They either are requested to submit a video, learner work samples, it might be a pre and post, learner performance data, pre and post. Again, they would be without names, like, confidential. And then observation results, peer, coach, principal. So for one of our micro-credentials that Katie created, we have an observation as part of it, that you have to have your coach or principal come in and observe you executing those high leverage practices, and then you would submit those results. The final piece is a reflection that embeds that evidence collected and that data connected to at least one Utah effective teaching standard, and how they see that execution of their lesson and implementation landed for students, and what they would do next, and those kinds of things. So those are the required elements. And then beyond that, there are supplemental evidence. So a developer of the micro-credential can also require additional pieces, where they can say, you can provide additional for candidate choice in the preparation and planning, or they can also afford them to be able to submit survey results, artifacts. Maybe they created an app to use with their students, or they created a screencast. Depending on the type of micro-credential is where that variability comes in. It could be student reflections or testimonials about their experience. And so those are the options that we have. The required are this top table, but there is some flexibility by the designer of the micro-credential if they want to include other options for teachers for demonstration. But what we found early on was allowing teachers to submit whatever they wanted wasn't getting us the rigor required. And so the committee has landed on being a little more prescriptive. And at this point, the field is pretty satisfied. We're seeing good growth in micro-credentials. We'll be releasing a couple hundred in the next 2 years that the staff is working on right now in coordination with educators. It's been quite a lift, but we're getting there to move forward. Does that help answer your question, Board Member Davis?
She says, yes, it answers it perfectly.
Okay.
I'm glad you can see that. Other questions or thoughts about, I don't see any online, don't see any hands. Randy, Matt, who are here with me. I really appreciate this discussion. I admitted I completely owned the fact that I was having a hard time understanding what this meant and how it looked different than a course, and I think I'm almost there. So I appreciate the discussion. We will undoubtedly have it again with the board, and I think there are some interesting Utah-specific implications that we'll need to work our way through. But I think it's a really good, like you said, if I already know how to do it, I'm kind of sorry. I'm the one that's going on Cindy, so I'm sorry. But when I earned my administrative credential, I remembered, and this was like back in 2000, but I remember going to some of the professors and saying, I already know this, I have already studied this, can you just trust me? And in those days,
They did not
they had worked, I'd worked with several of them, and I was able to be able to, in the old language from when I was going from college, high school to college was, I was able to club out of those courses. And so I think there's real value in this as long as we make sure that there's adequate substance. So, and adequate sort of standards, because it'd be awfully easy to just say, well, I think she knows it, or it feels like she knows it.
It's been a journey.
Yeah, it is a process. Thank you. So
we just have one final slide
of
what
to
expect moving forward. So
please,
you want to talk about what's coming?
Yeah, so we have what the implications of this are huge. Again, it's a really scalable way to see progress in our educators and for them to be recognized for their work on continuing to engage in professional learning that's self-directed. It's amazing. We have personalized endorsement pathways. So going back to what you were sharing about, like, having these courses. No, but like that's a real thing of like, I've been doing this for a while. Can that matter to what is reflected in my own understanding? And that, so we're extending this, long-term plan. We're still in the early stages of allowing micro-credentials to be the evidence that could support earning specific endorsements, which would enable more students to have access to educators who have demonstrated that they are qualified to teach their content. And then also that LEAs, we have the micro-credential group that's coming together, and they're representing several different of our LEAs who are able to share how they're going to be leveraging this, not just from like a statewide perspective, but even in their local level of how they're going to incentivize this, or maybe help support the teachers in earning these micro-credentials and having them align with their priorities. And so we've got JUAB, which, if I could just shout out, those guys are doing some amazingly innovative things with micro-credentials and just really pairing what they're doing with professional learning and having this supportive mechanism of a micro-credential, which again is not a course, but could support a course, which could, give them a way to extend that. And so, and then there's even some discussion in the early stages of like micro-credentials for students, which really aligns with our personal competency-based learning work that we're working on developing as well. So
one of the things we're working on for the allowing USBE credit, a lot of our rules, almost all of them, don't allow USBE credit for lane change. So we started some conversations with them this summer with the superintendents in the rural schools saying, why don't you, what are the barriers? We had some conversations with the council, and their suggestions were there was a lack of trust for a while with USBE and the quality that we were providing. And so some LEAs had pulled out. that trust is back, which is good to hear. And so it's more there a lack of awareness, it seems at this point, not the lack of trust in the quality any longer, but just that, oh, USB credit, other LEAs allow that for lane change, just this kind of awareness building that we're working on right now. So in a rural community, they often have lack of access to professional learning opportunities. They might be a great one to start affording these micro-credentials where teachers are doing some more self-research and self-learning and being able to demonstrate that competence to have those lane changes. So we're hoping to promote that a little more greatly in our rural communities. Our large LEAs, it is already prevalent. They can accept USB credit. There's sometimes some limitations as to how much they'll allow, those kinds of things, but in general, it's accepted. Our rural communities, in general, it's not accepted for a lane change. And so that's something that as a board, as you speak with people, that's one thing we're hoping to promote a little differently moving forward.
And virtually all the LEAs accept like university credit. And so in some of our districts that are here more locally will accept USB credit pretty interchangeably with university credit. They count the same for that lane change. And so that was where it was interesting to talk with them. And then our regional service centers who offer who are the professional learning arm for many of these rural districts were also saying, you know, that's something they'd like to help generate interest in.
Yeah, and I prompted a question from Member Booth.
I spent 40 plus years in higher education, and I recognized early on that much of what we were teaching was going to be outdated by next month. And just as one looks at the variety of professions and work opportunities for people that are going through the educational system nowadays, so many things have not even been invented or even been dreamed of yet. So this, I applaud your efforts to reimagine professional development, professional learning, lifelong learning. And especially I'm excited about how this could have implications for our students. Because if we can learn how to learn and how to really focus in on these kinds of micro-credential kinds of experiences, we can keep up with and be on, on the cutting edge of the incredible changes that are constantly occurring in our whatever content area, whatever part of society that we're preparing ourselves to make a contribution in. And so I'm very, very excited. And I'm so excited that we are having conversations that, yes, universities certainly are going to be able to provide coursework and give you credit for this, but USBE can also, and maybe regional service centers. And I mean, there are a lot of ways that we could empower various aspects of our statewide organization to assist and encourage these educators and students to learn and to demonstrate their learning and to
get some credit for it.
Get some credit for it, so that we're all, moving in a very positive direction and beginning to recognize that, yes, learning is, I mean, I can go to the university and get nothing out of the whole university experience. It depends on how much I apply myself. But if I can apply myself to whatever these things, these opportunities are that we're providing with USBE, I think it is magnificent.
It's a wonderful.
It's real education.
At least worth exploring and see how
Absolutely.
I have another kind of prompt that earlier. So could a micro-credential also be a classroom management kind of? Could it be
Like,
classroom
can you
management?
demonstrate competence of classroom management?
Right.
Yes. Yep, we don't have that one yet. So right now we prioritize based on the field and what they're kind of asking
So content, it's more
for.
content.
Right now it's the endorsements because of the new pathways, from the licensing and Apple teachers, like how some of those folks are coming in from degree areas that they still have to demonstrate some competence. One thing that Apple directors would love to see is elementary competencies and then being able to turn those into micro-credentials. So as those teachers are going through, but for our endorsements, it allows us to have multiple pathways. The goal with every endorsement is at least 2 pathways for every requirement. So instead of, you have to pass the praxis, but you can take the praxis, or you can take these courses, or you can do this micro-credential. We're trying to create flexibility and choice, because for middle school science, for example, you can take the praxis and pass 4 of the requirements for content, but you're still going to need to do the pedagogy option. And the pedagogy option could be a course or the micro-credential where you demonstrate your pedagogical skills. But the praxis doesn't, get at pedagogy pieces. So there's a lot of flexibility in the future of endorsements. And so right now, the field is waiting for us to build micro-credentials. So we're working on that. We have hundreds to build with the new pathways, which is great, but it also takes time, and we need to pilot them to make sure they're right before we release them for hundreds of educators. So the timeline, we release the new endorsements in July. We have a couple of years until they'll be fully implementable. That's not a word, in full implementation, but we'll be seeing progress over the next, 6 months to 2 years of those being released incrementally.
Perfect. That's so helpful. Especially to me, because I've been trying so hard to understand this, and you got right at the basic comments and questions. So
what's the price tag? What do we need to do as a board to be able to facilitate,
right now we've been
more
able to fund
efficient improvement, in terms of resources or personnel or developers or?
Yeah, right now we've been able to leverage the kindness and graciousness of educators. So we've been paying them to help develop the micro-credentials. And then the actual ongoing part of this is the teachers are paying $20, we might move it to $25, but that pays for the review. So that pays for the educator that is trained to review their submission and determine if it meets standard or not. And then if not, we return it with feedback and give the opportunity to resubmit if they'd like. So it's self-paying for itself. The only part that we're currently funding is the development of the micro-credentials, but once they're developed, it actually pays for itself. So we have a pretty good model right now, and we've been able to use Title II funds to be able to support the development. So right now we're good, but I'll be happy to come back to you as needed. I appreciate that question.
So yes, such a good discussion. Thank you. I think with that, we are finished. Am I missing anything? Okay, I think we are finished. So thank you, committee members. Thank you, as always, staff, for being so available and so informed.
Sorry, I was late.
It's been great. No,
I was in standards. I promise I wanted.
It's been really helpful, and the discussion was excellent. And I think you have 5 people who understand this better for when it goes to board discussion. So again, thank you. Our work here is done, folks, and we can reconvene for our study session at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. Oh, perfect. And that will just be it's
Online only.
Online only, but you could use that boardroom
Or any room.
Any room.
Yeah, if any of you wanted to stay, you're welcome.
So thanks to those from the public who endured our discussions too. That was really appreciated, and we hope to see you again personally someday. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Roger.